Living every day in your head for free. You can tap away, but I will not hear you scream. You can break the keys, spread your toxicity, your world outside reality. In your room, a little hideaway, but you let it through. Enough to go insane, living in the dark hasn't treated you well. You're building your own prison cell. Hey, wait, don't waste it on me. Spite, life's telling you, don't waste it on me. Did I brush you off? Is it your lack of friends? We never met, even if you pretend. Am I in your debt? I don't owe you nothing. Don't say something you'll regret. Hey, wait, don't waste it on me. Spite, life's telling you, don't waste it on me. Hate, rage, don't waste it on me. Spite, life's telling you, don't waste it on me. Wait, don't waste it on me. Spite, life's telling you, don't waste it. I'm telling you, don't waste it. Life's telling you, don't waste it on me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Talk. This is just a little quick thing I'm going to do every now and again. If there's news that we need to talk about, that's really quick to set up. I'm going to just talk about the main topic of the day. And today, of course, it seemed like a good time to start this with two lots of news regarding the ABK well, should we say Acti-Bliz deal with Xbox, of course. The differences between them. What's going to happen next, what the likelihood is of it closing in month, and what the knock-on effects are. But of course it is Coffee Talk because, of course, we're chilling with a nice coffee. Everybody in chat, hope you're getting drinks, coffee, snacks, whatever. It's a much more laid-back approach, this one. Hope everybody is well today. This is pretty much an open floor, so if anybody wants to jump in and talk about it, it's pretty much free to do so. Unmute yourself there, that'll help. So I've sent links out to my podcast crew, collective crew, and primetime crew, so anybody who wants to jump in throughout that is more than willing to. But we'll get into it anyway. So, of course, today we eventually had the ruling surrounding the preliminary injunction case from the FTC surrounding the Acti-Bliz deal. Now, of course, what they were attempting to do was essentially just stall the deal, so that they could take it to their own in-house team to essentially try and get them to back off. Essentially stall the deal, which is what the FTC are known for and have been known for in multiple other cases, including the Meta case, which they also lost the PI. Now, the knock-on effect of this was because the FTC also applied for the PI, or at least the attempting to apply for a PI. The CMA, which is the Competition Market Authority in the UK, also applied for essentially a delay in when the CAT hearing would take place. So essentially a bit like trying to do what a PI would do, which is a temporary pause on proceedings so that it would push it back to a later date. Funnily enough, of course, CAT rejected that from the CMA. So, of course, the CAT proceedings would take place on the regular date. They accused them of trying to stall proceedings and hold up the deal, or hold up the proceedings with CAT. Ultimately, of course, essentially just copying from the same hymn book that the FTC were doing. Now, before all of this kicked off, and before we get into the decision today, we essentially had found out that both the CMA and the FTC had essentially been colluding, but in a method they had been, because they were restricted in having conversations or in-depth conversations and sharing information after it was withdrawn from Microsoft, who withdrew the ability for the FTC and the CMA to do so. Now, with that said, lost my train of thought there. This is what happens when you do things ad hoc. Yep, gone. Never mind. So, today's ruling, essentially, the FTC have denied the preliminary injunction, citing that it would not, or the FTC would not have a realistic chance of winning in federal court overall if they tried to block this deal in federal, citing that it would not bring substantial harm to competition. If anything, would bring increased competition to the market. It is what we've been saying all along, what Microsoft's been saying all along. It's forcing the competition to act. We kind of knew where this was going to go anyway in the middle of it, but we couldn't really make the ultimate guarantee that they were going to grant the PI, or decline or grant the PI, as of course we just don't know. It's one of those things where you've got to expect the unexpected, and there was always a possibility, that the slim possibility, that they would grant the PI, because all of the judge needed to see was a marginal little track there that would bring doubt to proceedings, or doubt to Microsoft's ability to honour what they'd already presented to everybody. Hello, Web Dave. Hello. Are you wanting to jump in, Dave? Cheers, Pete, in the chat there. Snake90111. Bring this along a little bit. There we go. Wait, there we go. Bit better. Much better. Right. Jen, I'm waiting for my coffee to cool down a little bit. At the moment, it's going to scald my throat if I try to drink it. So yes, the PI was denied. The FTC have already stated that they're going to look at their next steps in the coming days. The CMA, however, have walked back on the CAT proceedings for the moment. That's not to say that CAT proceedings have ended, because they haven't. I think that's one common misconception. All they have done is they have jointly agreed to pause the CAT proceedings. So what that will entail, first and foremost, is that this is a joint decision as well. It's not just CAT. So CAT, Activision Blizzard, and Microsoft have all jointly agreed to pause the CAT proceedings. They have sent off that request to CAT. So, of course, once that is granted, and that could be within the next day or so, once that is granted, then there will be continuing discussions on remedies in order to close the deal. Now, there's multiple ways that this can go. Of course, you probably won't have heard the end of the FTC. However, as history shows, they also applied for a PI with the Meta case. When the PI was denied in that sense, the FTC did not end up objecting to that. They did not end up going back to the judge in order to go against that. So, on that front, we expect FTC maybe to walk away from this and just drop the injunction or drop the case, which would lead to a much easier road in the US. On the flip side, with regards to the CMA, there's a number of ways that this can go. Now, of course, your guess is as good as mine as to what they agree to. However, I'm in the firm belief that the ball is firmly in the Microsoft's hands at this point. I do believe as soon as that decision was made by the FTC, by the federal judge to the FTC, that it was denied. The CMA also understood by that point that their understanding of the deal and their case against the Activision Blizzard Microsoft transaction was relatively weak. Now, that's not to say that there isn't still potential loopholes in cloud that could cause harm, because that was the sticking point for any logical market. That was the sticking point. Console has never been a problem. The problem that the FTC had is they were trying to claim that all of the transaction was harming consumers. Console, multi-game subscription services, and cloud. Which, of course, there was no proof on any front that that was the case. Secondly, what helped Microsoft in this case was that they agreed to a lot of this, these conditions under oath in court. So Microsoft essentially confirmed that Call of Duty will be on all platforms and will remain on all platforms under oath. They also confirmed rightly that it is case-by-case basis for further Activision Blizzard titles to go on to certain platforms. It's not a one-shoe-fits-all scenario. And of course, they even had Sony under oath confirming that the Starfield approach, i.e. making that content exclusive, was not anti-competitive. So with that in mind, the approach by the CMA going forward had a far more weakened stance. They have Microsoft on record and under oath in court confirming that certain deals will be honoured. So, of course, that is under oath, which means they have to stick by that. Now, of course, naturally, they can just go against it, in which case then criminal proceedings will be brought against them, but let's face it, that's not going to happen. I don't believe that the court, Microsoft or Sony, expected them to agree to all of these things verbally to the judge and to the FTC, i.e. Call of Duty remaining everywhere under oath, but also confirming that the remainder of the content was under case-by-case basis. It's quite an amusing one, to be fair. It's quite an amusing one. And I think that kind of shocked them. Obviously, we also saw the FTC attempt to leverage Microsoft into agreeing to put every Activision Blizzard content onto PlayStation Plus day one, which the judge swiftly shut down, and rightly so. That wasn't the time or place to do such things or negotiate, and the judge said as much. Those are for negotiations between the two parties, but it's not something that needs to be discussed here. On the CMA's front, again, this all goes towards weakening their case going forwards. And hello to everybody in chat, by the way. I know I'm just rambling on here, but I know you're here to kind of hear the thoughts and have discussions around this. So I'm going to jump into a few kind of points in chat as well. So if you've got anything you want to see in chat, I will cover them. If you've got any questions you want to ask or any thoughts you've got, put them in chat, and I'll be sure to kind of read them out and run through them and answer them the best I can. On the CMA's front, I fully believe they want potentially stronger documentation to confirm that certain titles will remain on other platforms day and date. With regards to the cloud infrastructure and how the cloud agreements are placed, they may want to see those agreements. I don't know whether or not they've seen them. However, what we have known is that the agreements that were offered were not thoroughly investigated by the CMA, and we've seen that in their original block order, which came through, that they hadn't taken into context the contracts that were offered to these additional places and these other providers. So I fully expect them to revise that, have a look at those deals that were offered to cloud services and streaming services, which is an open transaction. Anybody can have that deal for any cloud service provider. It is open to all. The licenses, the agreements for additional content, etc., are negotiable platform by platform. Now, of course, NVIDIA were happy with the agreements, among many others. Now, Microsoft have openly said the ability to talk to them and thrash out an agreement is to anybody's liking. So if Sony want to go and have a conversation with Microsoft and thrash out an agreement, they can do so. If Amazon want to do that, if Google want to do that, if Netflix want to do that, they can go and have those conversations. And everyone has the ability to agree something with Microsoft on this. For me personally, I think this may take a little bit more time. I don't see it closing within the next week. I don't see Microsoft closing over the top of the UK. I think if you hadn't seen the CMA, Microsoft, and Activision Blizzard confirm that CAT proceedings were being paused, for instance, if CAT proceedings were going to continue onwards, then you may have seen a case where Microsoft and Activision would attempt to close over the top of CAT proceedings, i.e., irregardless of what the UK does. With the three parties agreeing to pause the proceedings and go into further remedies discussions, I cannot see this now being closed over the top of. Additionally, I can't see this closing within the next week or week and a half. Primarily because, of course, depending on how long it takes for them to negotiate those remedies, depends on and whether or not, of course, the CMA are happy with the proposals at the end of these discussions. Because at the end of the day, the CMA still has the ability to say, following further discussions, we are still not happy with the remedial process, and we will continue or resume the cap proceedings. That could always happen. However, I think it's going to take at least another 2.5 weeks. I foresee it potentially closing. And to answer potentially Baz's question here, Baz Cryptkeeper says, when do you think we will start seeing Activision Blizzard games come to Game Pass? I'll answer that in a moment. I foresee it closing by the beginning of August. Should the discussions with the CMA be fruitful and the remedies be to everybody's liking. What you have to understand as well here is that it isn't just the liking of the CMA. If Xbox, Microsoft, Activision do not like the remedial suggestions by the CMA, and they can't come to an agreement, then I foresee additional things also coming to pass. It could be that Microsoft also continue down the cat route. So there's a lot of hurdles still to progress here, but it is a positive. It's definitely a positive. Baz. Now this is a difficult one with regard to when games will come to Game Pass. With regards to Call of Duty, they have still got licensing agreements with Sony, which will be honoured until the end of 2024. So the likelihood you'll see Call of Duty in Game Pass will probably be 2025. With regards to other content, I think the moment the deal closes and is cleared, you will start to see other additional titles like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake, like Spyro, like Crash Bandicoot, like all of those games. I think you'll start to see them within a month of the deal closing. You'll start to see them drip feed into Game Pass. You won't see it going in there immediately. They won't have something ready to go straight away. But you will see it within, I think, within a month or so of it closing. Now, again, that's Call of Duty excluded. I think Call of Duty, again, we won't see until 2025. You may see older titles, older Call of Duty titles that they no longer have licensing agreements on. So it could be that you see Call of Duty Ghosts, Infinite Warfare, the original Call of Duties like the 360 titles, and maybe even Vanguard go into it. But the new one you won't see in Game Pass for until at least 2025. Yeah, I'm looking through chat here as well. Again, any questions, just let me know and I'll try my best to answer them. Mike Askew there says, by August 1st, I believe, the CMA is looking at Khan having to go to Capitol Hill over undisclosed documents. Definitely don't want more scrutiny. Yeah, I agree. The scrutinization between them. Noah says, I do want to mention this too before I go. I think Sony is going to be the next blockbuster. Sony is going to be the next blockbuster. I could be wrong, but I'm still going to stick with my gut feeling to it. No, I don't think they will. I think Sony will ultimately bow to industry practices and where the industry direction are going. We've already seen a slight change in trend with Sony, which was probably reluctantly, but of course with the change to games as a service games, or at least introduction of that model, and looking at what games will be games as a service going forwards, etc. I think ultimately, much like the judge said for the FTC, ultimately I think they will also slowly but surely start to increase the proposition that PlayStation Plus has. I think they will begin with small. We've seen that already. They've begun with slightly smaller titles like Stray and things like that going into Game Pass. It's not Game Pass, into PS Plus day one. But I think we'll start to see over time, and it is just a matter of time, Sony put their games into PlayStation Plus Premium day one. I think the words from the federal judge stating that Microsoft putting Call of Duty into Game Pass should only make Sony make their service more competitive, be a stinging approach. It is entirely up to Sony whether or not they choose to do that or not. Now, they don't have to follow that model, but it's called value proposition. What are you doing for your customers in order to justify their purchase? What are you doing in order to provide economic benefit to the consumer or provide positives, pro-consumer moves? Microsoft have demonstrated that with Game Pass. Whether or not the industry like it or don't like it or do like it makes absolutely no difference to what it is, which is pro-consumer. Jim Ryan can hate it all he likes. Bobby Kotick can hate it all he likes. Does the fact that it makes money or doesn't make money shy away from the fact that as a whole, the proposition itself is pro-consumer? If you're going to get a subscription service with Sony and you're getting your God of Wars, your Spider-Mans, your Horizons, your Gran Turismos, your Ghost of Tsushimas, all date and date in that service, are you telling me that is a negative for the consumer? That's going to negatively impact the consumer? No. What Sony are afraid of is the fact that they're spending 200 million and 6 years making these games, and they don't believe that these games will return a profit being in a subscription service. They don't believe that those games going into a sub-service would entice people to subscribe. Now, basic mathematics, if you have a look at it, for Microsoft, is 30 million subs, which is roughly where they are now for Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate, Game Pass PC. If you're averaging it out at what is now 10 instead of the $12.99, which obviously had the increase, you're looking at billions a year, billions in revenue a year. Now, even if you take out, now that's per year, you have to look at what's classed as return of investment per title. So a game that cost 200 million over 6 years wasn't 200 million as a lump sum. It wasn't immediate expenditure of 200 million, which means the write-off for that money was over a 6-year period. So the 200 million actually goes down to probably about 12.5 million per year, or 20 million per year, depending on the cost, over the time period of its development. Sony have definitely made at least that much per annum. At least. That's not including expansions. That's not including microtransactions on third party, which they get money for. That's not including third party sales, which they've got a store full of third party sales on there. And second party, not the main first party. There is many methods of earning money on Sony's platform that they're being disingenuous about. very disingenuous. A subservice in itself, if you're just offering a game, but you remove the ability to purchase a game, and you remove the ability to purchase secondary items, or season passes, or microtransactions, or skins, or anything like that. If you remove it and it was just these games go into a service, you can't buy the games outside of the service, it is by itself, that would be a cost negative. That would not benefit anybody. It would benefit the consumer very short term, but in the long term, the company wouldn't make money. It would be negative effect because there isn't any other ability. And then that would be the end of it. The difference is, however, what Sony aren't kind of saying here, and what the rest of the industry don't seem to understand for some reason, and I can't quite understand why, is that the subservice is just an additional option. Whether that be PlayStation Plus, whether that be Nintendo Switch Online, whether that be Xbox Game Pass, they're an additional option. So you get these games in the service, day and date for first party, sometimes day and date for third party and second party. However, third party, second party, outside of EA, which are there forever, are, once they go into the vault, of course, not immediately, leave the service after a certain period, unless they agree a new contract. As we've seen with the likes of GTA, which has returned, and we've got the next gen version there, as we've seen with numerous titles actually being reconsidered and put back onto the service after a little bit. Quantum Break obviously renegotiated and put that back on as well. But what you see with the subservice as it stands is you have the subservice as an option, so you can download these games. Secondarily, if you've got something like a premium edition for first party stuff, you don't have to buy the game as a whole. You can have the game, but if you want the premium edition of the game, you only have to buy the $30 add-on or £30 add-on for that premium edition, which might grant early access to the game for a week early. It might grant new skins. It could grant new add-ons. As we've seen with the most recent Starfield, you get the first expansion. You get some skins and weapon skins. You get early access. You get artwork. So there's additional things that come with a premium edition, and you're only paying that 30. You're not paying the 100 that you would do for a full-fledged premium edition. So there's a benefit to the consumer. However, there's also a benefit to Microsoft in which that they're still generating additional revenues beside the subservice because people are buying this premium edition. That goes the same for deluxe editions. That goes the same for add-ons or expansions to game. As you've seen, if you didn't have Game Pass Ultimate with Gears, where you got the Gears 5 story expansion, Hive Busters, additional within the Ultimate Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, you got that free. If you didn't have Game Pass Ultimate, you only had Game Pass, then Hive Busters was an additional 10-20 quid. Then you've got skins, story expansions, add-ons, all of this stuff that is secondary as costings. Of course, then when the games are just about to leave the service, i.e. third party or second party, there is a little discount in the 6 days prior to them leaving the service where you can buy the game at a reduced rate and keep it in your library forever. You're getting a saving, but the developer and Microsoft are also earning additional revenue incomes there. This is the same for every subservice, natural subservices. So, of course, microtransactions were around before subservices came into play. Doesn't make any difference. So everybody, every subservice, Sony, Nintendo, and otherwise, generate revenue in a multitude of ways. So it's not just relying on one thing, it's relying on everything. So if it was just a subservice and you couldn't buy games, I would absolutely agree that it doesn't benefit anybody. But facts are facts. It's not just a subservice. You can still buy games, and we still buy lots of games. I've bought Diablo. I've bought an absolute boatload of third-party games, especially the amount of third-party games that are coming out this year. Jedi Survivor being one of them, and things like that. There's a boatload of games this year that people have bought separately. Hogwarts Legacy, for instance, bought the Ultimate Edition for that. So, yeah. Now, let's get into some of the chat here anyway. I do see a lot. I've been rambling for a bit. Might ask you, do you think this will force Sony to finally do that for PlayStation Plus? Day and date? Yes, in the future I think it will. I think it'll take a while for them to bow under pressure, but I think they will eventually in order to continue competing. It's all about competition at the end of the day. And to continue competing, they have to offer a like-for-like service to the competitor. I think it'll still take a bit of time because, of course, they don't want to. They're very reluctant to do that. But I think eventually, it'll probably take another year or so, but eventually they will start doing day and date. Yes. I know Sony said they can't afford to do day and date, but corporations lie. They can absolutely afford to do day and date. They're just choosing not to. They're saying that these games cost X amount of money, as I've just kind of described before. Yes, a game might cost 150, 200 million to create, but if that game's also taking 6 to 7 years to create, then the return of investment, or at least the actual investment, is laid out over a 6-year period, not in a one lump sum. So it's not like they've just forked out 200 million in one go and said, go create. That 200 million comprises of the average cost of developers, where in the US, the average wage for a developer is about $100,000. So if you're doing that over a couple of hundred people, there's tens of millions already. The vast majority of development costs are staff wages. Aside from that, you're talking about return of investment. So, okay, we make 3 billion or 4 billion a year on subservices. If that 4 billion turns, if we do that per year, and we've created 2 first-party AAA blockbusters, and it's took us 6 years to do that, it's the actual amount that we would have to recoup every year from a subservice would equate to around about 50 million per year, just for your first party titles. Now that's not including your microtransactions, anything like that. Sony are being very elusive in the way that they kind of break down how much they make from third parties and subservices, but we know it's a substantial amount, which is why they're market leaders. We also know that they've used their leverage in order to get competitive or more competitive contracts with third parties and other games to go onto their service due to their substantial market lead on console. So they definitely have the money in order to do it. They're financially just choosing to pocket more of that money than the competitors are. Microsoft, initially, what you have to do in order to get one of these services up and running correctly is operate at a loss for a certain period. You have to be a loss leader. After a certain period, then you start going neutral, then you start going neutral ground in the middle, and then you start making money. And of course, Microsoft themselves have said, we're not in the business of not being profitable, and we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't profitable. So we know Game Pass is now turning a profit, or at least not making a loss, but ultimately they need to make a profit. And Satya Nadella has ultimately said that to Phil Spencer as well. So we can kind of glean from those conversations that Game Pass is indeed profitable, even if it's marginal. Axton, let's have a look here. Let's go down, see if I've missed anything. Yes, Pat. older COD games will come to Game Pass, yeah. I think once the deal is closed, within the first, I would say within a month or two, you'll start to see them drip feed in, like COD Ghosts and Vanguard and Infinite Warfare and things like that. Some of the older games will start to drip feed into it. Absolutely. But we won't see Modern Warfare 2 or Modern Warfare Remaster. I don't think we'll see those in the service until 2025. I think kind of contractual terms and things like that kind of elude them from away from that. So I think we'll see some of the older titles in there within kind of a month or two of the transaction closing. Thank you, Crovon. Thanks for jumping in quickly. Thanks, Pat. Love you, Dutch, he says. I don't know whether it was you or whether or not Tamara just jumped on your phone quickly. Yes, Street Fighter 6, yeah. Can't forget about that, Baz. Yeah, definitely bought that as well. Right, let's have a look again. See what else I've missed. I know there's a few in chat. Yeah, is my coffee ready to drink yet? I think it is. Definitely ready to drink. Thank God for that. There we go. It's coffee talk, and it's the first time I've had an actual drink of me coffee. Right, let's have a quick read up the chat here and see what else we can answer. Green Goblin, I missed your comment earlier on regarding the European deal when it comes to cloud gaming. The difference is the European, the EC, the European Market Authority, the European Commission, we're happy to essentially police the deals, which is why they were happy to sign it off. They said, okay, you've got these agreements in place with these second party and third party companies in order to bring Call of Duty and other titles to their cloud, and we're happy to police those to make sure that is indeed maintained. The CMA, however, did not want to police it, which is why they said no to those. But in the same breath, they also didn't look through the contracts or take them at face value. They just essentially ignored the cloud contracts that were offered. So time will tell as to what they can agree or do agree. Let's have a look here. Is Sony coming to the table? Abdi, sorry, I see in your chat there. Is Sony coming to the table for a 10-year deal? The deal was never off the table. It's still available for them to discuss. We've seen in the FTC discussions with the federal court, of course, in the PI trial just last week. We've seen the emails back and forwards between Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan regarding what that deal would look like. And to be fair, the deal is still on the table that Microsoft offered, but Sony essentially wanted to make sure that every bit of Activision Blizzard content went into their service day and date. Every bit of Activision Blizzard content would be available to them going forward, no matter what the game is. They also wanted to make sure that they could renegotiate on the Bethesda content and get Bethesda games on the console, of which Xbox said no. The original deal is still available to you, but we will not agree to those terms. So the ball is thoroughly in Microsoft's court, and Sony either have to just agree what is being presented to them, or stop demanding unrealistic terms. They've said themselves that having games like Starfield exclusive isn't anti-competitive. So if it's not anti-competitive, they don't have a foothold to stand on. And in the console space, that's just unfortunate for them. It's not going to do anything for them. So yes, Sony need to bow under pressure again for that 10-year deal. I think they'll still get the games regardless, because I don't think Microsoft will drop to that level and be spiteful, as much as people want them to be. But yeah. Yeah, Green Goblin essentially echoed that. Sony will have to come to the table for a 10-year deal, but that's up to Sony. Phil Spencer said under oath that you would put Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years. Yeah, he did, exactly. He's already agreed to that. He did not agree to any other content, though, under oath, which was exactly what Jim Ryan and the FTC were trying to do, was to get them to confirm every bit of Activision Blizzard content would go to PlayStation. And thankfully, the judge closed that down and said that's not what we're here for. And Microsoft also did not agree under oath to do that. So PlayStation is the only one that's been agreed to, day and date. Axton, I also agree. Nobody really cares about the console wars other than fanboys showing the pie chart from them being in third place. Help this case get the deal done. Yeah. To be fair, it probably did as well. Yeah, Fanto, you are correct. Roblox is worth 120 billion. Yeah, which is insane. But again, it's got a limitless ceiling because of the type of game it is. It is essentially open source. Anybody can create on Roblox and make games within a game. We've seen people make Call of Duty clones within Roblox, which you can freely download and play. And it plays like the old school Call of Duties, believe it or not. Thank you, Mike Askew, as well. Noah Berger says, all right, I understand. I just want to mention, because there's a rule of thumb on running business and treat the consumer and employees good instead of drinking the green Kool-Aid. The greed Kool-Aid. Yeah, exactly. 80% of COD 23 will go to Microsoft. To be fair, they can agree the terms. With regards to contractual terms, that's another thing I'll stipulate. With regards to contractual terms, that's not something that Sony will like, because Sony will previously have been offered 80-20 splits and have been offered 80-20 splits for Call of Duty. Do I think after this is merged, they will get that going forward? Absolutely not. After 2024, when the Call of Duty contracts end, that will most definitely be revised. They will get Call of Duty probably at a 70-30 split again. And they will lose a little bit of revenue on that. But I think the thing that will hurt them the most is that a lot of that microtransaction or MTX stuff from Call of Duty and from Warzone, etc., that revenue, that reduced revenue income, that 10%, will of course go to Microsoft. And I don't think that's the main reason PlayStation have been kicking off about Call of Duty so much. The microtransaction revenue. And they know the split that they've got for Call of Duty, which is 80-20. And of course, we know that on the opposite side, Activision, because of PlayStation's dealings and their leverage in the market, Activision did the opposite to Microsoft and demanded them have reduced rates in order for Call of Duty to remain on the console. Otherwise, they would have pulled it off Xbox in the first place. So, yeah. Let's have a look down here. I'd say deal's off the table now. Andrew, calling in. No, deal's definitely not off the table. I think it's not. The difference will be is that the deal won't be the same deal that at least it'll be the same deal that Microsoft offered, but they'll definitely not be able. They won't be in a position to negotiate or attempt to negotiate like they did with Activision prior to the acquisition. Prior to the Activision, it was just Activision and Sony discussing a preferential contract between them. After the acquisition, Jesus me, Activision acquisition, it's a hell of a mouthful, you know. I haven't even been drinking. It'll be a different footing altogether, because of course it's under Microsoft roof, so they have the rights or the ability to discuss what is happening and what those contract terms are. Sony will not be able to charge a crossplay tax. They can certainly try it, but I think Microsoft could just say charge the tax, then you get less favorable rates on Call of Duty. It's one of those things. They have the upper hand. Or if they want to be awkward and not allow crossplay for their players, then that would just make them look worse. It's about public perception. Hopefully they can add achievements to the mobile games. I would absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I think they could add achievements to the mobile games. The entire strategy of this acquisition anyway is more for King. Hello there, BitCloud. Is more for King and getting the mobile arm of Xbox up and running to a greater degree. Now we've seen little achievements for smaller mobile games, but not fully fledged ones. So I think getting achievements on the mobile games for Call of Duty or mobile Call of Duty, that would be awesome. But I think it will happen. We know they've got a mobile game app in the works. It depends how much people want that. BitCloud, if you want to jump in and say a piece about this, feel free. There's already a link in the podcast group chat. So if you're free and you want to jump in and get some bars off, you're welcome to. Yeah, Forza Street had them. Yeah, I think the Gears games had them as well. I think a couple of others did. But yeah, I would fully imagine they'd put achievements on the games that come from mobile. Thank you, G-Wave. I just thought I'd just do a quick drop in and chat. A nice chilled out. Well, I say chilled out. I've been rabbiting on by myself for the best part of like an hour or something. I did miss something actually up before there. Sure, I missed a few things actually. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, Phil Spencer. So from Snake, Phil Spencer admitting Xbox have lost the console wars so far was interesting. What do you think about that, and do you agree? Absolutely. It's well beyond them. Well beyond them. The console market was established well before Xbox got into the game. Despite Xbox being in the market for 20 years and doing well to stay in the market for the last 20 years, PlayStation have a huge upper hand in that they have a well-known name worldwide. Oh, hi, Dusty. Well-known name worldwide. It's like a brand name. Everybody knows Ferrari. Everybody knows Nike. Everybody knows Adidas. Everybody knows PlayStation. Xbox, believe it or not, in some territories is still very much an unknown factor. It's not a household or a common name. And usually when you talk about Xbox, people just automatically refer to Nintendo or PlayStation because they are names that they recognize. Even the older generation recognize Nintendo and PlayStation. But a lot still don't know what an Xbox is. So they have a massive upper hand on that front. A massive upper hand. They have around about, if you're adding previous gen and current gen, you're talking about 140, anywhere between 140 and 160 million console users for PlayStation, with upwards of 40 to 50 million PS Plus subscribers. And I think about 100 million on PlayStation Now, or PlayStation Network in general, like the base version of PlayStation Plus. So they've got a substantial market lead on all fronts on the console section, and I think putting it more into context, if we have a look at the way Phil Spencer described that market, is that it's unlikely at this stage that people are going to substantially flip-flop between those consoles, which is why they're focusing on mobile, on PC and on cloud, because they're new markets. They're markets that haven't really been attacked by either Sony, Nintendo, or Xbox before properly, which opens up to a whole new batch of users that weren't there before. On the console market, you've got people that have been on Xbox or PlayStation for the entirety of, let's say, some people that have been there since PlayStation 1, 2, 3, and 4. They have a whole back catalogue of digital games. They've got tons of consoles, peripherals. They've got loads of headsets and controllers. They've got all of their friends lists. They've got all their trophies. To jump ship over to another console, another platform entirely, and start from scratch and leave behind their old library, it's just not going to happen. Which is why Microsoft also introduced the Series S, which was the easy point of access console. It was cheaper. Yes, it was slightly weaker, but it was meant as a secondary console primarily, and a cheap into the current gen. Microsoft will never, on the console front, catch up to PlayStation. It's far too much of breaking news, the CMA said that they were not fighting any further. I think do you mean the CMA's paused the transaction? Because I think that is what is happening here. I'll just double check anyway. Let's go on to the old Twitter first. Let's double check what you're saying there. Because I know this was what I was saying before with regards. No, it's still the same as before. Yeah, still the same as before. That's fine. No, we've spoke about that. It is actually the CMA Activision Blizzard and Microsoft have agreed to pause the cat case. They are in discussions to discuss further remedies so that the deal can close. They are continuing them discussions, and it will likely take a couple of weeks in order for those details to go under and be processed and agreed to. That's if they get agreed to. Otherwise, cat proceedings will commence. The original cat case was actually scheduled for the 24th of the month, so likely we'll have something in place by the 24th. If not, then the cat proceeding will commence again, and of course it will be in trial with cat on the 24th. Yes, but Sony's lead on the market will remain that way on the console market. There was never a console war, really, because there was such a substantial lead. It's not like a subscription service, for instance. If you just have like a Netflix or a Disney Plus or something like that, it's a little buy-in. It's like your $7.99 or your $7.99 per month. Or do we get both, or do we have one? Or do we choose between? Which one's got the better the better content on the service? It's a bit of a heavier investment, this one. So it's hundreds. You're talking like $250 for the base console, or $450 for the high end console, and likewise on PlayStation side. So when somebody's investing in that console, they've spent their money. Those that can afford just the one, which is the vast majority of people, will only get the one console. They won't get both. Will make that choice. They'll stick with that choice, and that's where they'll stay. And then the next generation comes along, and they'll automatically go for that next gen version of what they've already got. And they'll not move. They'll just buy the same thing again. They'll get the PlayStation 6, they'll get the PlayStation 7, and so on and so forth. They'll just keep going. It's the same with Xbox users. Xbox users will start on the Xbox One, 360, Xbox One X, the Xbox One S, then the Series consoles, and then so on and so forth. Much like me, started on the One, the OG Xbox One, of course, 360, then the One, then the One S, then the One X, then the Series S, then the Series X and S, and so on and so forth. And on the PlayStation side, I had the PS1, I had the PS2, didn't have the PS3, returned on PS4, and then of course going into PS5 whenever there's something that I want to play on that thing. But yeah, it's a case of you can't. There's a small gap of maybe 2% of users that will swap, but the remainder that come onto Xbox are doing so as a secondary platform, not completely jumping ship. So you might get, say, 2 million out of 150 million PlayStation consumers going over to Xbox. Might be less, might be more. Gabe says, so if this deal was always going to go through, what was the point in delay initiated by the PS? Actually, the delay was initiated by the FTC. They've got a history under Lena Khan of delay tactics with transactions for large mergers, so that they wouldn't go through negotiations. They wouldn't financially see the benefit of taking this through federal court. They would get sick of paying the financial, the fees for the legality of it going through federal court, and essentially it's just a time wasting tactic by the FTC. And this isn't just the Microsoft thing. This was also they attempted to do it with Meta. They've done it with many other smaller tech firms. They've done it with many other firms where they'll just delay it until the point where the merging parties cancel the deal because they can't be bothered anymore and they don't want to waste more time or money fighting it in court, even if their transaction is absolutely fine and there is no problems. It's just a delay tactic by the FTC. They've been known to do it before, and they continue to do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always pan out, as we've seen with both the Meta case and this case. In both circumstances, the PI was denied by federal judges. So yes, it is what it is. Good evening, Dave. How's it going? But yes, so overall, I think so. This is how I think it'll pan out over the next few weeks. Personal opinion, how I think it'll pan out over the next few weeks. I think we will see. I think we will see by the 24th. It won't be next week. It will might be the end of next week. Maybe it's the week after. We will see the merging parties and the CMA come to an agreement. Remedies. I do not foresee those remedies excluding the UK market in any way, shape, or form from any form of transactional benefits. So I don't think we'll see the UK being excluded from games going into cloud services or games going into Gamepass. I don't think we'll see that happening. I don't think we'll see that type of agreement come to pass. I think they will look for stronger reassurances or a written contract between themselves and the CMA that Call of Duty will remain on all platforms for a minimum of 10 years. If that contract is agreed or written legal document to confirm to the CMA that that is indeed the case, then I think we'll see that come to pass. On the cloud side, again, I think we'll see Microsoft providing all of the contracts that have been provided to the subsidiary services, such as NVIDIA, for cloud streaming, will be presented to the CMA to review and go over in depth. If they feel they need further assurances or further legal scripture to solidify those, then I think that will be agreed upon. I don't see them bending under pressure for anything. I don't think they'll exclude the market from anything, because that doesn't benefit Microsoft in any way, shape, or form, and that kind of goes against their mission objectives. Now, every mission objectives sound weird, but every company has a mission objective or a mission statement. You tend to find mission statements in shareholder meetings or shareholder conferences, where they'll have mission statements for that particular conference or those meetings, where they lay out what their plans for the company are going forwards. Microsoft will not exclude a market from their mission statement in order to get this transaction done. They will make sure that they get the wording and the legalities corrected with the CMA so that they're happy proceeding with it. It could just be providing additional reassurances, and I think that is what ultimately it will boil down to. So yes. Dusty, which IP would you like to come back from this deal? For me, Ultimate Alliance 3 would be sick. Soldier of Fortune for me. Loved Soldier of Fortune. Will we see it again? Probably not. Do I want it? Yes. Loved that game. Loved it on PC. Really, really gory when it first came out. It doesn't hold up well. Does not hold up well. But really, really gory. It was a really good game as well. I loved it. Loved it on PC. Back when I could use mouse and keyboard for gaming. I am absolutely terrible at it now. Try and put a mouse and keyboard in front of me for gaming, I would definitely lose. Yeah, there's so many games I'd love to see come back. I'd love to see Toys for Bob given Conkers or Banjo or something like that to do. There's so many titles that could really go under it. What I additionally see as well over the next few weeks is the FTC will not fight against the ruling, and eventually they will drop the case. They will ultimately not continue to proceed with this because they know in federal court they won't win. The federal judge has told them on today's ruling, based on the evidence you've provided versus the evidence Microsoft have provided and their sworn oath in federal court, you do not have the ability to win in court, which is essentially what the federal ruling is today. The judge has stipulated, based on the facts presented, you would not win in court if this went to federal, which is essentially what a PI is meant to do. It's meant to stall on the basis that essentially the PI would be granted only if the judge thinks that there is a slight chance that the FT... It doesn't even have to be a big chance. They will grant a PI if there is a slight chance that they will win the ruling in federal court as a whole. So if they went to federal to block it unconditionally, they would win it as a whole. The PI is there to rule whether or not the judge believes that the FTC, by delaying, would ultimately win in federal court with this case. The ruling today said that the FTC would not, it would extremely unlikely, but they would not win in court based on the evidence provided. So therefore, the PI is denied. Of course, and to summarize, the evidence that was provided in that, ultimately the CMA and others have been taken into account, the decision made by the federal judge and all of those comments made under oath by Microsoft, which of course is the legal thing. They can't, if they agree to something under oath, then essentially that's as good as a written document. They cannot break that. They are legally obliged to do that now that they are under oath. And now other markets also understand that, which is why today we've also seen, and we're talking within the space of half an hour, we've seen the CMA walk back on the original CAT proceeding and put a pause on CAT proceedings whilst they discuss further remedies. Believe it or not, it was a matter of about 15 minutes before we saw the news of the CMA that I commented on a friend's post on Twitter called Chris, stating that I think based on today's results with PI, we will see CMA begin to discuss remedies again. And about, like I said, 15-20 minutes later, the CMA released a statement saying that themselves, Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, have requested a pause on the CAT proceedings to discuss further remedial procedures or remedial discussions between the parties. So it's quite easy to read, to be honest, when you've got those kind of hard evidence going on in federal courts worldwide. Other market authorities take note of that and use that to their advantage or disadvantage. The CMA clearly knew, following that decision, that the procedure wouldn't work well for them either if they continued with it. So they've backtracked, which is very unusual, by the way. It is not commonplace. It's extremely rare for that to happen, where they put a pause on CAT proceedings to further discuss remedial procedures. So for that to occur tells me it's only a positive sign. And to summarize, no, Microsoft won't close over the top of the UK. They will make sure that they've got all their eggs in one basket and they will close the entire thing in one swoop. One, they've got the go-ahead from the CMA. And again, I think the FTC will just drop it. I don't think they'll continue. After losing the PI, I don't think they'll appeal. The wording was pretty strong in the suggestions. They've got no additional evidence to provide, so they can appeal the decision, but there's nothing that would dissuade the judge, I don't think, to change their opinion on that. And I don't think any other judge would change their opinion on it either. Again, they did not appeal the Meta decision when they were also denied a PI injunction. So, yeah. Any further questions before I start wrapping this up for today? Anyone else get any questions about this? Anybody enjoy that coffee? Did anybody like this mini coffee talk type thing that I do, yeah? Would anybody like more of these going forward? Yes, more. Okay. Will do. let's hope the topics in the future are going to be interesting. Then, let's hope the topics are going to be interesting. The reason I can kind of slightly talk about legalities of things, I'm not, of course, a lawyer. I don't work in that market at all. I've got friends that are lawyers. Of course, you know, Gaz is a lawyer. You know, Luke Steele is a lawyer. Gaz is more property. Luke, however, works or has worked with and against the CMA. So he knows how that procedure works as well. Myself, I'm in corporate sales. So I know how legal wording works, and I know how to provide legal assurances to clients, and how you get those legal assurances to bind. Now, for us, anything that is in written transactional format, and a lot of people will know this, if I email a client and I stipulate in writing that my services cost X amount, I legally am obliged to charge only that amount. If I have any hidden charges whatsoever, and the customer were to complain, or the client were to complain about that hidden charge, legally, they'll be able to walk out that contract scot-free, regardless of when they're in that contract and when they start that proceeding. Because of that paper trail, they have the ability to do that. So when it comes to agreeing things at high level, paper trails are essential, which is why you see things like emails come out from these discussions with high-level executives, because it's not just about nuance, it's about what was guaranteed via email, what wasn't guaranteed, what was put there as a definitive. What you didn't see from Microsoft was definitive wording in those emails, which is always a benefit to them. Not so much a benefit to the competitor, though, who are demanding things, because that shows their arm. It doesn't show Microsoft's. Microsoft simply refer to the proposal on each occasion. If they had, again, essentially, if they had agreed to anything via email, much like they would have done under oath, legally, they've put their foot in it. Thought I was a competitive eater. I'm not a competitive eater. Do I look like a competitive eater? Okay, hell. I'm definitely not a competitive eater. I've got metabolism of a racehorse, though. No. Legally, though, if anything's in writing, anything's written down in definitives, any terms and conditions, any email trails that you confirm something definitively without small print, then that's something you have to deal with yourself. And you are legally obliged to uphold that you've done via email. I've had to do that on multiple occasions where I've had to get even supply chains confirming via email that things are not take or pay. Take or pay means essentially if you use X amount, that you will only be charged for X amount and you will not be charged for any more or any less. So for instance, if you have a quantity 100 but you only used 80, you will only be charged for 80. You will not be charged for the 100 that you originally purchased. So that's what's classed as take or pay. So again, depending on what clients do what and what you've agreed to on email, clients can request confirmations via email as a form of legal document or of a form of legal agreement. So you've got to be careful with wording on email, nuances on email, and the way you present something, because if you agree to something in written format, that includes anything that you ever do, by the way. If you ever speak to any company and they, in email, in written format, confirm that they can do something or they are doing something for you, for instance, we will compensate you X amount for your display, you've got written proof there that that X amount has been offered. You then have the legal ability to go and say, okay, you offered this amount, I want that amount. They cannot backtrack on that amount anymore. They've already offered that amount. It's legal turning. Grim and Gruesome. Sony turned down that PS Plus deal too, didn't they? They did turn down the... Well, they kind of did, but Microsoft haven't taken it off the table, so they turned it down. It was the Call of Duty deal. They turned down the deal for Call of Duty and cloud and things like that. Well, at least they didn't meet their terms. They were in negotiations. They didn't meet the terms that Sony wanted, which was extreme. They wanted every game within Activision Blizzard going on to PlayStation forever. They also wanted to renegotiate Bethesda games as part of the deal. And Microsoft said no, but the original offer stands. So they've got an offer there from Microsoft, which still stands, but they are not renegotiating. They essentially said, we are not bowing to your demands. These are the terms. Feel free to take them. That's the way it is. But yeah. Yes. Any more questions about the whole FTC, CMA, PI, cloud, anything? Anything you want me to cover before we wind this thing down today? Been rabbiting it on for an hour and 20 minutes. All alone. Doing quite well, I think. And I finished my coffee as well. How can the CMA win? I think at this stage they won't. But I think they will play. They still will be a little bit awkward around the terminology and the contracts agreed to and the legalities side of things. But I think ultimately they will come to an agreement that is still positive, net positive for everybody. I don't think the UK will be left. I don't think the UK will be left out of any Gamepass edition. I don't think they'll be left out of any cloud editions or anything like that. I think they'll be just looking to make more cemented legal clarifications around the games that are going away, which I think they will get. Favorite coffee? Oof, that's a good one. I'm a latte man, but it's very much a Dutch thing or a European thing. A very creamy coffee. So I always, and some people might do this, but I've done this for a long time. With my coffees, I have evaporated milk. Whether that be regular coffee, or whether it be lattes, it's evaporated milk. I love a good cappuccino, but I love a latte. And the vast majority of the time, actually, I'm drinking cappuccinos. Love cappuccinos. With the decision of what happened with the FTC, were the CMA not working with them on the same arguments of cloud being a market? Yes, yeah, they were. And again, which is why we've seen the CMA backtrack and request a pause to cap proceedings in order to go through remedial process because of the ruling of the federal court in the US, which is what the CMA kind of referred to because of today's ruling. ABK, Microsoft, and CMA have agreed to pause cap proceedings in order to discuss further remedial procedures. So yeah, I think part of that being the fact that they argued in court that, and Sony agreed that cloud wasn't a separate market. Cloud was part of all one market. Splendiferous again. I feel this, like the CMA, should not have a case being that the FTC just lost. It should not be a factor at all. They're not a factor, but they will still get remedial agreements. So it's not that they're blocking it still, which is why they, and don't take this lightly, the CMA have never, in fact, it's very rare that the CMA ever walk back on CAT proceedings. They usually go through with them 95% of the time. They'll just go through with it and go through CAT proceedings. The fact that they've requested a pause on the proceedings in order to renegotiate with Microsoft and Activision Blizzard tells you that they're more inclined now, following the FTC decision, to come to an agreement that will close the deal. So they are still a factor because the UK is still the third largest market for Microsoft, believe it or not. I know people want to think the UK is a small market for them, but it's their third largest. It's America, the EU, and then the UK in that particular order, and then the rest of the world and each individual market. So it's still their third largest market. Still a massive chunk of people for them. The problem always was, though, was the fact that the nascent cloud market that was in the UK only made up 2,000 users at most, which wasn't substantially harming consumers. So they didn't really have it in the first place. And if they went to CAT, I think they would have asked them to go back to the drawing board and look through it all again. Yeah, it's not that they have to come to some kind of agreement with them, but I think they will come to an agreement with them. However, it's more, it's not just agreeing to whatever the CMA want. This is a case of both of them renegotiating the terms on as a mutual agreement. The CMA, Microsoft, and Activision have all unilaterally agreed to pause. So they've all collectively went to the CAT and said, we wish to pause the CAT proceedings so that we can go and renegotiate these terms. So they've all decided as a collective to renegotiate the terms so that the deal can close. So yeah, they were the first to seek to block. Well, the second, the FTC, of course, attempted to and failed. But the UK were the first to do it, and like I say, in a very rare turn of events, because it doesn't happen often, it's extremely rare, they've decided to pause CAT proceedings to renegotiate, which is a very positive step. It's uncharted territory. It doesn't happen. So I still think it's going to take a couple of weeks. The CAT case, the actual CAT case in court, would have been the 24th of July. So I foresee any remedial procedures and any documents regarding remedies being agreed before the 24th. Because if they haven't agreed something by the 24th, then CAT procedures, I would imagine, would begin again. That's not to say that the CMA would win versus CAT, but I think they'll work to that cut-off point, the original 24th cut-off point, with regards to negotiations. Grim and gruesome. Hopefully we see Gun get remastered, or at least made backward compatible. Activision has some decent IPs. They're sitting on an absolute treasure trove of forgotten IPs that they could use, and they just don't for some reason. And Phil Spencer has alluded to wanting to bring some of those back and get some of the teams working on some of these old IPs. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed when it gets done. Oh, then we'll see that. We'll see that. Baz just says, just check the CD Keys site. I use a lot of Activision Blizzard games. Have gone down in price with this deal going through. Oh yeah, they will do, because they'll be trying to make something before games within the next few months begin to inevitably drop on Game Pass, and then they make nothing out of them. So they'll be trying to make something out of them before they're worth essentially next to nothing to them. I would imagine, though, the cost of they'll be trying to make as much as they can off the cost of Game Pass Ultimate. I don't think that'll be too much different to what the actual new price is. The new price is $12.99 UK. I think, is that $14.99 or something now? So I think you'll maybe see a 20 pence reduction or something like that. I don't think it'll be any different or much different. And you're welcome, Splendiferous, anytime at all. Right, I think I'm going to wrap this little chit chat up now. I hope you've enjoyed Coffee Talk. I'm more than happy to do these again in the future if people like the kind of the little one-on-ones here, or even if we get a couple of people on to just randomly chat about kind of spontaneous topics that happen to occur in day and our thoughts. If you did like it, of course, like, share, and subscribe. Always helps. But I'm going to go and make some food now, because I haven't eaten since I got in from work. I have had a coffee, just kind of stemmed the tide a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope everybody enjoyed this anyway. Of course, we're back again tomorrow with a midweek mix-up podcast. I'll be needing to create the links and the thumbnails and everything for that shortly. So keep an eye out, because that'll go up on the channel shortly for everybody, etc. Reminders, etc. So that's midweek mix-up podcast again tomorrow, 7 p.m. UK, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. But until then, guys and gals, whoever's been watching, I hope you have an awesome evening. Enjoy your gaming, of course. And what time is it right now for me? It is 9 p.m. Splendiferous, 9 p.m. 9 o'clock at night. It's not that late, but it's late-ish. Still bright, still nice and sunny outside, as you can see there. And it's still boiling hot, by the way. I wish I knew what temperature it was in here. I'm going to get a thermometer for when it's in the summer. Like, as you can probably imagine here, I've got like a TV, subwoofer, amplifier, like surround sound system, Xbox, PlayStation things hooked up over there. I've got an Xbox monitor, laptop, another monitor, console, everything switched on, lights, the lot. It is warm in this room. Jesus Christ. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. Hope you did enjoy this show. I'm happy to do it again. You can probably see I am sweating, absolutely sweating balls. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have an awesome evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow for the Mix Up podcast. Have a good one, guys.